Once upon a time, in a very small and quiet kingdom, the people no longer smiled. The houses were dark, the flowers didn't bloom, and even the birds had stopped singing. Why? Because the kingdom was ruled by a greedy, grumpy king and an even meaner queen. The king cared only for gold. He kept mountains of it in a big treasure room and counted it every night. The queen was cold as ice. She didn't like children, animals, or music. "Quiet," she would yell. "No laughing, no dancing, no fun." In the middle of this sad kingdom lived a kind mouse. She wasn't just any mouse, she was a good mouse. She wore a little blue cloak, carried a tiny silver wand, and had a sparkle in her eyes. She lived in a cozy hole under the stairs of the royal palace. No one knew she was there, not even the king or queen. Her name was Mina, and Mina had a secret. She could do a little magic. Not big, loud spells, but small, quiet magic that helped people in tiny ways. She made cracks disappear in the palace floor so servants wouldn't trip. She guided lost ants back to their homes. She whispered songs to flowers so they'd bloom again. Every night, Mina peeked through a hole in the wall and watched the queen. "She's never happy," Mina whispered. Maybe if she saw something kind, she would smile, but the queen never smiled. She just scowled and ordered the guards to shout at anyone who looked too cheerful. One stormy night, the queen stood by the window and said something strange. "Soon, I'll have what I've always wanted," she hissed. "A daughter, but not for love, for power. She'll be the richest, most feared princess in the land." Mina's whiskers twitched. A baby? The queen didn't seem like someone who would care for a child. That night, Mina scurried into her tiny bed, made of a ribbon and a cotton ball. But she couldn't sleep. "If there's going to be a baby in this palace," she whispered to the moon outside her window, "someone has to protect her." The next morning, thunder still rolled through the sky. The palace was busy. Servants ran through halls, guards paced in armor, and a strange doctor with a crooked hat arrived in a squeaky carriage. And then a sound no one expected. Wah! A baby girl had been born. The queen didn't sing to her. The king didn't hold her. Instead, they gave the baby a crown and ordered her to stay locked in the tallest tower. But from a crack in the wall, Mina the good mouse watched. She saw the baby's soft eyes and tiny fingers. And at that moment, Mina knew, this baby is good. She will be kind, and I will be her friend no matter what. And so began a secret friendship that would grow stronger than any wall and brighter than any spell. The baby princess grew, but she didn't grow like most children. She never saw the sunshine through trees. She never smelled the sweetness of cake at birthday parties. She never danced, never played with other children, and never had anyone tuck her in at night. She lived alone in the tallest tower of the palace, with only stone walls, cold floors, and a tiny window high above her head. Her name was Isabel. She had bright eyes and curly brown hair. Even as a baby, she didn't cry much. She just looked around and listened, always listening. And that's how she heard Mina for the first time. It happened one quiet night. The wind was howling, and the rain tapped against the tower window. Isabel, only a baby, sat bundled in a blanket on the floor, hugging a ragged little pillow. Suddenly, from the wall, came a soft sound. "Tika tika, scratch, scratch." Then, from a tiny hole near the floor, peeked a gray nose, 2 whiskers, and then a little furry face. It was Mina, the good mouse. She wore her blue cloak and carried her silver wand like always, and her eyes sparkled when she saw the baby. "Hello, little one," Mina whispered kindly. "Don't be afraid." Baby Isabel didn't cry. She didn't scream. She blinked and smiled. From that moment on, they were friends. Every night, when the queen thought Isabel was sleeping, Mina would slip through the hole in the wall with tiny gifts: a pink ribbon, a dried petal from the palace garden, or a pebble that glowed when the moonlight hit it just right. When Isabel was a little older, Mina taught her songs. "Sing quietly," Mina would say, sitting on the windowsill, "so the guards won't hear." Isabel would hum gentle melodies, her voice soft as a breeze. Mina told her stories too about forests where animals had tea parties and islands where clouds were made of whipped cream. And sometimes, Mina used her small, secret magic. She made a tiny spark float and swirl in the air like a firefly. She made the baby's cracked wooden stool smooth again. She even made a spiderweb sparkle with colors for a few seconds just to make Isabel giggle. The princess learned how to smile, even when no one was around. She learned that even in the tallest, loneliest tower, there could be love. The queen never visited her. The king only came once, to say, "One day, you'll marry a rich prince. Until then, be quiet." But Mina came every day. As Isabel grew, she whispered back. She sang. She laughed. One evening, as stars blinked above, she whispered to the hole in the wall, "Mina, are you real? Or are you just a dream?" And Mina, peeking out with her tiny silver wand, smiled. "I'm as real as your heart, Isabel, and I'll always be near." Outside the tower, the kingdom remained cold and quiet. But inside, behind the stone walls, something magical was growing. A friendship, a light, and the first secret of many to come. The seasons passed, and little Princess Isabel grew taller and wiser. She now sang whole songs with a soft, clear voice. She painted pictures with crushed berries and chalk on the tower walls. And every day, she waited for the tiny scratching sound that meant her friend Mina the Good Mouse had arrived. But far below the tower, in the darkest part of the palace, the queen was making plans. She sat in a cold, high-backed chair, wearing a heavy crown of black metal. Her eyes were sharp, her mouth thin, and her voice colder than winter wind. "The girl is growing," she said to her husband, the greedy king. "Soon she will be old enough to use." The king blinked. "Use? For what?" "To marry a prince, of course," the queen hissed. "A prince from the richest kingdom in the world. Once she is his wife, we will take his gold and his lands and his throne." The king smiled, counting coins in his head. "But," the queen added, "she must obey. No questions, no tears. If she resists, she will be locked away forever." The king shrugged. "So be it." But what neither of them knew was that Mina had been listening. The clever little mouse had hidden behind a crack in the stone wall. Her ears twitched, her eyes narrowed. "No, no, no," she muttered. "This cannot happen." She raced back up to the tower, her tiny paws tapping over stone. When she reached the top, she slipped into the small hole in Isabel's room, panting. The princess was sitting by the window, painting a butterfly on the wall with a bit of red berry juice. "Mina," she gasped. "What's wrong?" Mina climbed onto the windowsill, her cloak fluttering. "The queen," she began. "She wants to send you far away. She wants to force you to marry someone not for love, but for power." Isabel's eyes widened. "I don't want to leave. I don't want to marry a stranger." Mina touched her paw gently to the girl's hand. "You won't, I promise. But we must be careful now." That night, they made a plan. Mina would listen, watch, sneak into secret rooms, learn everything the queen was planning. And Isabel? She would act like she knew nothing. She would smile, sing, and obey, while secretly getting stronger, braver, and ready. Before leaving, Mina gave Isabel a small gift, a silver button on a string. "If you ever feel scared," she said, "hold this and whisper my name. I'll come." The princess clutched the button close. Thank you, Mina. Outside the tower, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, Isabel sat in the candlelight, her tiny silver button glowing in her hand. She knew something had changed. Her world was no longer just stories and songs. Now, it was time to be brave. The next morning, the sky above the tower was a soft blue, brushed with pink clouds. Birds chirped high overhead, but none ever flew close. The queen had once ordered all nests near the palace destroyed. But this morning, something strange happened. As Isabel sat by the small window, holding her silver button and whispering a tune Mina had taught her, she heard a soft flutter, flap, 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 and then a gentle thump. Something had landed on the windowsill. The girl gasped. A bird! It was a small, snow-white dove, with bright black eyes and a piece of golden thread tied gently around its leg. Its feathers shimmered in the sunlight like soft pearls. Hello, Isabel said quietly, careful not to scare it. The dove tilted its head and then hopped closer. She held out her finger, and to her surprise, the dove climbed onto it light as a feather, warm as a heartbeat. That evening, when Mina the Good Mouse arrived, Isabel couldn't stop smiling. Look, she whispered. He came to me, a real bird. Mina's eyes widened. A dove? She said, amazed. That's no ordinary bird, Isabel. Doves are messengers, hope and magic. If he came to you, then something good is near. They named him Luma, which means light in the old language of the forest. From that day on, Luma visited every morning. He brought tiny treasures, a flower petal, a shiny bead, even a crumpled note with faded letters. Isabel couldn't read it, but Mina studied it closely. It's from the Northlands, Mina murmured. Far beyond this kingdom, someone is calling for help, or offering it. Luma stayed longer each day. He cooed sweetly while Isabel sang, and sometimes Mina whispered to him in a tongue older than the palace walls. The three of them, girl, mouse, bird, shared laughter, secrets, and quiet dreams. But far below, in the throne room, the queen grew restless. She's too quiet, she hissed. Too calm. She ordered the guards to check the tower. Report anything strange, she snapped. No surprises, no visitors. I want her ready to marry the prince by winter. The guards clanked up the stairs, armor rattling. Mina heard them first. She pulled Isabel close. Hide the button, hide the bird. Isabel quickly slipped the silver button into her slipper and opened the window wide. Go, Luma, she whispered. Hide in the clouds. The dove vanished into the blue just as the guards burst in. They searched the room. They found nothing. The girl said nothing. The mouse stayed hidden. And the queen, though angry, could not prove her suspicions. But Isabel knew. The queen had warmth rising, and fear was growing in her cold, cold heart. When the guards left, Mina crawled out and smiled. You were brave, she whispered, braver than ever. Isabel hugged her. Together, they looked out at the sky, where a single white feather floated gently down and landed on the windowsill, soft, silent, and full of promise. It was late autumn now. The leaves outside the tower had turned golden, though Isabel could only see their colors from her high window. Down below, the palace was busier than usual, noisy footsteps, horses arriving, servants whispering. From the wall crack, Mina the Good Mouse watched with her sharp eyes. Something was happening. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded behind the towers, the queen appeared in Isabel's room for the first time in many weeks. She wore a black and silver gown, heavy with jewels. Her crown glittered, but her smile was thin and cold. My daughter, she said, in a voice that didn't sound like it belonged to someone with a heart. We have a very special visitor. Isabel stood up slowly. A visitor? The queen nodded. A prince. from a land far away, tall, strong, and very rich. She stepped forward and narrowed her eyes. Be pleasant, be polite, smile when I tell you. He may become your husband. Then she turned and swept out of the room. Mina crawled out from behind the curtain. So soon? She whispered. The queen is moving faster than we thought. Isabel's hands trembled. I don't want to marry a stranger. You won't, Mina said firmly. But we must be careful. Let's see who this prince really is. The next day, the visitor arrived. The tower doors opened and in walked a tall young man in dark blue clothes, a gold chain across his chest, and shiny boots that clicked on the floor. He had straight black hair and sharp eyes. He bowed politely. Princess Isabel, he said with a smile. I am Prince Varian. Isabel smiled politely, just as Mina had taught her. Welcome to the tower, Prince. They sat together. He asked her simple questions: what she liked to read, if she could play music, how tall the window was. But something about his voice made Mina's whiskers twitch. Hidden behind a loose brick, she watched. Prince Varian smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. His words were smooth, but they felt heavy. He kept glancing at the walls, the floor, even the corner near the crack, as if he was looking for something. When he left, Mina whispered, He doesn't trust you. He suspects something. Do you think he's dangerous? Isabel asked softly. I think, Mina said. He's not here for you. He's here for what he can take. That night, Luma the dove flew in with a piece of folded paper tied to his leg. Mina read it quickly. Oh no! What is it? Isabel asked. The prince's father, Mina said slowly, has already sent wagons, empty wagons, to take treasure. They're planning to rob us? Number worse, Mina said. They're planning to take you and everything you might inherit. Isabel sat on the edge of her small bed. What do we do? We plan, Mina said, and we stay strong. Outside the tower, the wind howled. Inside, the mouse, the dove, and the girl sat in a circle of candlelight, their faces brave and their hearts ready for what was coming next, because the game had begun. But they were no longer playing alone. The tower was quiet, but not with sadness, with thinking. Princess Isabel sat cross-legged on the floor, her chin resting on her hand. Before her lay a crumpled map drawn by Mina on a scrap of parchment using berry juice. Next to it sat Mina the Good Mouse, her blue cloak neat, her silver wand beside her like a tiny sword. Perched on the curtain rod above them was Luma the dove, his soft white feathers puffed up as he listened. We don't have much time, Mina said. The wedding is planned for the full moon. That's only 5 nights from now. Isabel frowned. If I refuse, the queen will lock me away. Or worse. Mina nodded. So we won't refuse, not yet. We'll pretend to go along with it. That gives us time. Time to do what? To gather help. But who would help us? Isabel asked sadly. No one ever visits me except the prince, and the guards won't listen. Mina's eyes sparkled. Then we'll make them listen. With hope. She pointed to the candle on the table. We'll send a message. Isabel blinked. How? No one outside can hear us. Not with words, Mina said, grinning. With light. That night, they began the plan. Isabel lit her candle and held it near the window. When Luma landed, Mina tied a white feather to his leg, and Isabel whispered to him, Fly high, circle twice over the village, and land on the tallest chimney. Luma cooed once and flew into the night sky. Meanwhile, Mina and Isabel began preparing. Mina crept through the palace at night, eavesdropping and gathering scraps. A broken key, a scrap of silk, a dropped button, a spool of thread. Isabel used the items to make gifts, tokens of kindness, tiny symbols of peace. They sent one every night tied to Luma's leg or dropped from the tower window with a message inside. To the kitchen maid, a charm for courage. to the old gardener, a packet of seeds Mina had saved, to the stable boy, a polished stone with the word freedom scratched into it. Little by little, word began to spread. "Did you hear?" one servant whispered. "The princess is not what the queen says she is. She sings to birds," said another. "They say she lights a candle each night for us." One evening, Luma returned not with a message, but with a ribbon, tied carefully to his leg, a ribbon from the village, and a note. "We believe in you." Isabel's heart leapt. Mina grinned. "It's working!" But the queen! She was starting to notice. That night, she stood at the base of the tower, staring up at the tiny flickering light in the high window. "She's too quiet," she muttered. "Too clever." And far below, in the shadows, a new figure watched the queen. A figure with a hood and glowing eyes. Someone neither Isabel nor Mina had ever met. Yet, night had fallen across the kingdom. In the village below, the wind rustled gently through chimneys and lanterns flickered in windows. But within the stone palace, something colder was stirring, something hidden. Up in the tower, Princess Isabel sat by her window, holding a fresh message from the village tied with string. It read only 2 words: "Be careful." She looked to Mina, who stood near the candle, twitching her whiskers. "I don't like this," the mouse said. "Someone knows something, someone besides us." Above, Luma the dove circled once, then landed on the sill. He cooed low and fluttered nervously, like he'd seen something on the way. "What is it, Luma?" Isabel asked softly, stroking his feathers. The dove looked toward the forest beyond the castle walls, a place that had been quiet for years. Mina followed his gaze. "Something's watching," she murmured. That night, after Isabel had gone to sleep with the silver button tucked in her hand, Mina slipped through her hole and crept down, down, down through the castle walls. Her paws made no sound as she moved through cracks, beams, and forgotten vents. And then she heard a voice in the dark. Soon the tower will be silent." Mina froze. She turned a corner in the wall and saw him. A figure in a black cloak, standing alone in the hallway. She couldn't see his face, only his eyes, glowing faintly, golden like candlelight. He was whispering, but not to himself, to someone she couldn't see. "I'll climb the tower," he said. "No magic mouse will stop me. The queen will be pleased." Then, as if sensing her, he turned his head sharply. Mina ducked. Heart pounding, she scurried back up the wall faster than she had ever moved. She burst into the tower room, panting. "Isabel!" she gasped. The girl awoke instantly. "What is it?" "There's someone new in the palace," Mina whispered. "He works for the queen, or maybe for himself. I don't know yet, but he's dangerous, and he's coming for us." Isabel's eyes widened, but she didn't cry. She sat up straight. "Then we get ready." They spent the rest of the night preparing. Mina sprinkled a soft line of moon chalk across the floor by the door. Luma hid feathers near the window that would shimmer if touched by someone with cruel thoughts. Isabel wrote a note to the kitchen maid. "Beware the man with golden eyes." Just before sunrise, Luma perched again at the window and stared into the misty trees. And there, at the edge of the woods, stood a figure in black, watching, waiting. Isabel stepped beside him. He's not the only one watching now. From that moment on, the game had changed. The candle was still burning, the messages still sent. But now the mouse, the girl, and the dove knew someone else was in the shadows. And not all shadows can be trusted. By the next evening, the tower was no longer just a place of waiting. It had become a secret workshop. Princess Isabel, sitting by her window, was carefully cutting scraps of cloth and thread. Beside her, Mina the Good Mouse had unrolled a tiny blueprint drawn with berry ink on a piece of parchment no larger than a leaf. "We're not strong," Mina said, pointing to a drawing of gears and pulleys. "But we're clever." Luma the dove flapped his wings once and landed beside them, his eyes sharp and alert. He'd flown across the castle twice today, and both times had seen the same thing: the man in the cloak with glowing golden eyes. Watching. Waiting. "He hasn't entered the tower yet," Mina said. "But he's circling closer. We need to find out who he is and stop him before he climbs." So they set to work. Isabel placed small bits of chalk powder under the door. If anyone stepped there, they'd leave a trail. Mina built tiny tripwires from threads pulled from Isabel's blanket. She tied them near cracks in the wall and along the windowsill. Luma flew messages out to the servants and villagers. One read, "The Queen has sent someone new. Watch the shadows." Another, "Golden eyes are not to be trusted." Then they waited. That night, the air was colder than usual. Clouds covered the moon. The castle felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Suddenly, Cree, the door to the tower opened. Footsteps. Slow, careful. Not the Queen, not a guard. Someone who moved like smoke. Isabel held her breath and gripped her silver button. Mina crouched beside her wand. Luma hid behind a curtain, feathers barely fluttering. Then snap, one of the threads tightened. A tiny bell made of a spoon handle let out a ting. Someone was there. A shadow moved across the floor. Mina darted forward, aiming her wand at the chalk line. With a flash of soft blue light, the dust flew upward, outlining the figure in gold powder. There he was, the man with the glowing eyes. Tall, hooded, his face half hidden, but now caught in their web. "You're clever," he said in a low voice, "but not clever enough." He reached toward Isabel, and suddenly Luma dove from above, wings flapping furiously, pecking at the man's hood. "Now!" cried Mina. Isabel threw the silver button toward the wall, and where it landed, a light burst out like a star. The man stumbled back, hissing, shielding his face. Then he was gone as fast as he had come, vanished into the dark stairwell. The tower fell silent again. Isabel dropped to the floor, shaking. What was that?" Mina came to her side. "A spy, a thief, someone sent to take you. Maybe not by the Queen, maybe by someone worse." Luma landed on her shoulder, still flustered. "But we held him off," Mina said gently. "And now we know what he looks like." Isabel nodded. "We need help." Mina looked out the window. "And I know just who to ask." The time for hiding was ending. The time for allies had come. The next morning, the tower felt both quiet and brave. Princess Isabel had barely slept, her silver button clutched tightly in her hand. Mina the Good Mouse paced the edge of the windowsill, deep in thought, while Luma the dove circled above the tower 3 times before gliding back inside. "He hasn't returned," Luma cooed with a nod. "Not yet," Mina replied. "But he will, and next time, he won't come alone." Isabel sighed. "I wish someone strong could help us. Someone brave, someone magical." Mina's whiskers twitched. "There is someone," she said slowly. "But they haven't been called in a very long time." "Who?" Isabel leaned forward. "Not who. What?" Mina pulled a bundle from behind a loose stone in the wall. It looked like a small pouch made of fabric and twine. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a lump of soft gray cloth, buttons, twigs, and bits of string. "A spell doll," Mina whispered. "A doll?" Isabel looked puzzled. Mina nodded. "Made with care, kindness, and a promise. It can come to life if the right words are spoken and the right heart calls it." She looked up at the girl. "And you, Isabel, have that heart. So together, They began to build. From old scraps of her torn bedsheet, Isabel stitched a little coat. Mina used a bent sewing pin as a sword and tied it to the doll's side. Luma brought the final piece, a tiny piece of cloud, caught on his wing, light and soft as breath. They shaped the body from straw and wool, button eyes and twine limbs. When it was finished, they stood in a circle, girl, mouse, bird, and whispered together, sewn with care by heart and hand. Rise and walk and gently stand, by thread and air, by moon and star. Be our friend, just as you are. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wind stirred, the candle flickered, and the doll moved. It blinked its button eyes, wiggled its straw fingers, and slowly stood. "Hello," it said in a soft, scratchy voice. "My name is Thimble," Isabel gasped. Mina smiled. Luma flapped once in surprise. "You're real," Isabel whispered. "I'm here to protect," Thimble said. He drew his sewing pin sword and stood as tall as a 5-inch doll could. "We need you," Mina said. "There's someone dangerous in the castle." Thimble bowed. "Then I'll stand in every shadow and wait." From that moment, the tower had 4 defenders. That night, the trap was set again. But this time, when the wind howled and the shadows crept near, Thimble was waiting. That night, the stars above the tower blinked through thin clouds, and the wind whispered against the stones like it carried a warning. But inside the room, Princess Isabel, Mina the Good Mouse, Luma the Dove, and their newest companion, the thread and straw doll named Thimble, were ready. Isabel sat by her candle, pretending to read. Mina perched near the door, wand in paw. Luma was hidden on the curtain rod, eyes glowing in the shadows. And Thimble stood by the windowsill, straight as a soldier, his tiny sewing pin sword gleaming in the moonlight. "I can feel it," Mina whispered. "He's coming." Down below, boots clicked on cold stone. Soft, measured, like someone trying not to be heard. Then creak! The tower door opened. Darkness spilled in. A voice followed it low and slow, like smoke curling through the crack. "You think your tricks will work again?" It was the cloaked figure, the man with golden eyes. This time, he wore no hesitation. He stepped into the room with purpose, one hand reaching into the folds of his cloak. "Princess," he said softly, "you should have accepted your fate. Your mother had a plan for you. You were to be valuable." Isabel stood tall, though her hands shook. "I am not a thing to be owned." "No?" he sneered. "Then you're nothing." Suddenly, he reached forward fast. But something faster leapt from the shadows. Thimble. The little doll flew across the room like a wind-blown leaf, sword raised, and jabbed the man's hand with the sharp tip of his silver sewing pin. "Yow!" the man shouted, stumbling backward. What is this?" Before he could react, Mina leapt from the dresser, wand glowing. She tapped the floor, and a shimmer of blue light rose up a circle of protection. Luma Dove, pecking at the man's hood, flapping with fury. The golden-eyed intruder tried to run but slipped on a patch of chalk powder they'd left behind. He crashed to the floor, his hood slipped. For the first time, they saw his face. It was pale and sharp, with hollow cheeks and eyes that glowed not from light but from something inside him. Dark magic. He scrambled to his feet. "This isn't over," he hissed. "The Queen doesn't scare us," Isabel said, stepping forward. "I'm not afraid anymore." Behind her stood Thimble, sword pointed. Mina, wand raised. Luma, wings wide. The man stared at them all, a girl, a mouse, a bird, and a doll, and for the first time, he looked afraid. He turned and fled, down the stairs, cloak trailing behind him like a shadow that no longer belonged here. Silence returned. Then a cheer, soft but real. They had won the first battle. Thimble sheathed his pin with a bow. Mina wiped her brow. Isabel smiled. And far away, in the queen's chamber, a mirror cracked. She had felt the magic shift. And she was not pleased. Down in the royal wing of the palace, the queen stood before her tallest mirror, cracked now. Right through the center, she stared at her reflection. Her crown tilted slightly, her eyes narrowed like knives. She knew. She had felt it. Her servant had failed. The princess, the mouse, the dove, and something else. Something strange. Something stitched. She turned sharply and swept the pieces of the mirror off her table. "No more games," she snarled. "No more messengers. If I want this over, I shall end it myself." She called for her guards. "Ready the tower," she ordered. "Tomorrow, at dawn, I will visit the girl. Alone." The guards looked uneasy. No one ever went to the tower. "But, Your Majesty," "I said alone." High above, in the tower room, Mina, Isabel, Luma, and Thimble were already watching the shadows grow longer. They knew something was coming. Something big. "She's going to climb those stairs," Mina said, her voice tight. "She's done waiting." Isabel stood at the window, arms crossed, her candle flickering beside her. "I won't pretend anymore." Mina looked up. "Are you sure?" The girl nodded. "She never cared about me. She wanted a prize, not a daughter." "And you," Mina said gently, "are not a prize. You're a light, and now you need to shine." They began preparing not for escape, but for a final stand. Thimble sharpened his sewing pin sword and drew chalk patterns around the room. Mina brewed a tiny potion in a bottle cap, glowing faintly blue. Luma flew one last message to the village. "She comes at dawn." Then he returned and perched beside Isabel. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. At that moment, none of them were. When morning came, the sun rose behind the tower in soft gold light. Birds sang low. The air was still. And then... footsteps. Real ones. Heavy, steady, royal. The door creaked open, and there stood the queen. She was draped in deep purple velvet, her crown tall, her cloak trailing like night. But her eyes were colder than winter. "My daughter," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. "You've been very busy." "I'm not your daughter," Isabel replied, her voice calm. "Not anymore." The queen stepped forward. "You are mine by birth." "I belong to myself," Isabel said. The queen's lips curled. "You've been corrupted by that rodent." Mina stepped forward, wand raised. Better a rodent than a tyrant. The queen raised her hand, dark magic swirling around her fingers. "Then, I will end this." But she didn't know that the room had already been spelled. When her boots stepped inside the chalk circle, the light flared and the magic she held began to tremble. What is this?" she hissed. "A mirror," Mina said. "One that reflects who you really are." The queen gasped as her swirling power turned back on her wild, untamed. Her own magic pushed her back. She stumbled. "Luma dove." Thimble struck her cloak with his pin, and Isabel raised her voice. "You do not scare me." For the first time, the queen looked small, and the tower glowed not with spells, but with truth. She fled, stumbled down the stairs, gone. And Isabel? She stood tall in the morning light. For the first time, not as a prisoner, but as a princess, and tomorrow, as a leader. For the first time in all her years, Princess Isabel stood at the top of the tower and looked down not in longing, but in freedom. The queen was gone, chased by her own magic, by truth, and by the courage of a girl, a mouse, a dove, and a doll made of thread. The door to the tower stood wide open. Wind swept through it like a song. Mina the good mouse climbed onto the windowsill, her blue cloak fluttering like a tiny flag. "We did it," she said softly. "We're not done yet," Isabel replied. "There's a whole kingdom that still thinks I'm locked away and silent." Luma landed beside them, a bright ribbon tied around his leg. Mina untied it and unrolled the tiny scroll. Her eyes sparkled. "It's from the villagers. They saw the queen flee. They're gathering in the square, waiting for a sign." Isabel didn't hesitate. "Then let's give them one." She took the candle that had been her only light during so many lonely nights, and with Mina's help, placed it in the window one last time, not as a call for help, but as a symbol of hope. Its golden flame flickered in the sunlight, bright as morning. Down below, the villagers gasped. "She's alive! She's standing at the window. She's smiling." Children pointed, old women cried, and even the baker's cat sat up straighter. The tower was no longer a prison. It was a lighthouse. Later that day, the tower stairs echoed with something entirely new, footsteps full of joy. Servants, villagers, and guards, once loyal to the queen, all came climbing up. Not to take, not to spy, but to greet, to help, to hear. Isabel stood at the top with her chin high, her silver button hanging from her neck like a pendant. "I never ruled anything," she said, "but I've learned that being heard is more powerful than being feared." Mina stood on her shoulder, proud as ever. Luma flew from hand to hand, delivering tiny messages of thanks. And Thimble, oh, brave Thimble, now stood on a cushion throne the villagers had made, tiny sword raised, button eyes blinking proudly. The castle halls were opened. The gold the queen had hoarded was found and returned to the people. The walls were washed, the gardens replanted, and songs, real songs, were sung in every room. The kingdom remembered how to smile. That night, when the stars shone bright and the moon rose over the hills, Isabel sat by her window one last time. Mina curled up beside her. "Do you think the queen will return?" Isabel asked. "She might," Mina said. "But next time, you won't be alone, and she won't be stronger." Luma cooed softly, resting on a new perch shaped like a crown. Thimble snoozed nearby, his sword tucked under a thimble helmet someone had made just for him. Isabel looked out across the land, her land now, and whispered, "Tomorrow, we begin again." The next morning, the castle square buzzed with life. Banners of blue and gold fluttered from windows. Flowers hung from balconies. Children ran through the courtyard with ribbon streamers, laughing out loud for the first time in what felt like forever. People from every corner of the kingdom had come. Old farmers in dusty coats, bakers with flour on their sleeves, seamstresses, stable hands, teachers, and traveling musicians all gathered, waiting for Princess Isabel. Inside the castle, Isabel stood in front of an old mirror, one that hadn't been cracked or cursed. She wore a simple gown, soft green with a golden sash. On her head sat no crown, but a single white feather, tucked gently behind her ear. Mina the good mouse sat on her shoulder, brushing a speck of dust from Isabel's collar. "You look perfect," Isabel smiled nervously. "I've never given a speech before." "Speak from your heart," Mina said. "That's something no queen ever did." Luma the dove perched on the window frame, wings half spread in encouragement. Thimble the doll adjusted his little pin sword at her side. The great bell rang outside 3 times. It was time. As Isabel stepped onto the balcony, a hush fell over the square. Thousands of eyes looked up, but Isabel didn't freeze. She breathed deeply and began. "My name is Isabel," she said, voice clear. "You may not know me, not truly. I was kept away, hidden in a tower, told to be quiet, told that I was meant to be used, but I am not an object." The crowd leaned closer. "I am not gold. I am not a crown. I am not a tool to trade." She paused, and Mina squeezed her shoulder gently. I am a girl, a voice, a heart, and I'm not alone anymore. Luma flew overhead, circling the sky. Mina smiled proudly. Thimble waved a tiny stitched flag. Isabel continued. I was saved not by armies or magic spells, but by kindness, by small things, by friends who were never meant to be heroes, but chose to be anyway. A murmur of warmth rolled through the crowd. You helped too, she said. You believed. You remembered what hope feels like, and that means we can build something new together. She raised her hand. No more fear, no more silence. Today, I don't become a queen. I become myself, and I offer my heart to all of you. A beat of silence. Then an enormous cheer exploded through the square. Isabel! Isabel! The bell rang again joyfully this time. The people clapped. They laughed. Some wept. In that moment, the kingdom didn't just receive a ruler. They received something more powerful. A leader who had known sorrow and still chose light. Days passed, then a week, then another. But the joy from Princess Isabel's speech didn't fade, it grew. Where silence once filled the halls, there was now music. Where weeds crept through the gardens, flowers began to bloom. Where windows were boarded shut, sunlight now poured in. But more than anything, the people themselves changed. They no longer whispered. They no longer tiptoed. They stood taller, spoke louder, smiled more. Because their new leader, a girl once locked away, had shown them what courage looked like. Isabel worked beside them. She helped the gardeners plant trees in the old courtyard. She held the ladder for the bell ringer as he hung bright banners from the tower. She even helped patch the nursery roof where children would one day learn stories, including hers. I never knew you could be tired from happiness, she laughed one afternoon, wiping dirt from her cheek. Mina the good mouse, sitting in a flower pot, grinned. That's the best kind of tired. Thimble the straw doll pushed a wheelbarrow full of marbles, which he thought were stones. Luma the dove delivered tiny scrolls with bright red wax seals, Isabel's very first letters as princess. But not everything was easy. There were still deep rooms in the palace, filled with shadows. Books written by the queen's old advisors. Locks with keys that had been lost on purpose. Portraits of rulers who never smiled. And in the village, there were still people who remembered how afraid they had once been. They didn't come to the square. They didn't sing. So Isabel made a plan. We'll bring the joy to them, she said. She led a small parade, not grand, but gentle. She rode a cart pulled by a donkey borrowed from the farm. Mina sat in a teacup on her shoulder. Luma flew ahead with ribbons. Thimble tossed rose petals from a pouch twice his size. They stopped in quiet corners, in small homes, and Isabel would say only this: "You are not forgotten, and you are not alone." One old man wept and said, "No ruler has ever come to my door." Well then, Isabel smiled, I suppose I'm the first. By the end of the week, something incredible happened. People began bringing her gifts. Honey jars with "For Our Princess" scribbled on them. Colorful scarves stitched with kind words. And even a lullaby, written by children, about the mouse in the blue cloak and the girl who sang in a tower. Isabel hung every note and drawing on the castle walls and left them there, so no one would forget how far they'd come. She looked at her friends, Mina, Luma, Thimble, and said softly, "This is just the beginning." And they all agreed. The moon was full, glowing soft and round over the castle as the people of the kingdom gathered for something they had never had before. A festival of goodness. There were no golden thrones, no guards in stiff armor, and no queen watching with cold eyes. Instead, there were lanterns, hundreds of them floating like tiny suns in the sky. There were pies on every table, flowers tucked behind every ear, and laughter around every corner. And at the center of it all stood Princess Isabel, She wore no crown, only a simple dress stitched by the village children, and a silver button necklace that sparkled like a star. Beside her stood her dearest friends, Mina the good mouse, in her blue cloak, with her silver wand tucked proudly at her side. Luma the dove, with a ribbon tied to one leg, flying loops overhead. Thimble the brave doll, waving from the edge of the dessert table, a cherry balanced on his head like a helmet. Isabel stepped forward as music quieted. "I was once a girl who believed no one could hear me," she said. "But I was wrong. Kindness hears everything, even in silence." She looked out at the glowing faces, lit by lanterns and love. "This festival isn't for a queen or a crown. It's for you. For everyone who chose courage instead of fear. For those who listened, who hoped, who helped." She smiled down at Mina. "And for those who were small, but mighty." The crowd erupted into cheers. Suddenly, boom! A burst of color lit up the night sky, golden stars, blue swirls, green butterflies made of sparks. Fireworks! Children clapped and spun in circles. Bakers tossed muffins into the air like juggling balls. Musicians played fiddles, flutes, and even spoons. And Isabel danced, not a royal waltz, not a rehearsed bow, but a joyful, wild, twirling dance with thimble in her hand, Luma circling above, and Mina drumming on a teacup lid. It was messy, silly, wonderful. Later that night, long after the music had quieted and the last lantern had floated away, Isabel sat beneath a tree near the tower. Mina curled up in her lap. Luma dozed on a branch. Thimble had already fallen asleep in an empty pastry box. "You really did it," Mina whispered. "We all did," Isabel replied. "Do you think the queen will ever come back?" the mouse asked. "Maybe," Isabel said honestly. "But if she does, she'll find a kingdom that isn't afraid." She looked up at the tower window, the one that had once been her only view of the world. It no longer felt high or far away. Now, it was simply part of the story. And that story was just beginning. The end. And also, the beginning.